Good evening, everybody. Welcome to, what is this, session 4 of our annual training. I'm going to get our slides up and get us started as quickly as possible. Joining me tonight on the panel, Wayne Gebline, Mike Gunther, and Steve Fafudis from TBLOA Training Committee. We're glad you're all here. Everybody should see our session 4 title slide. And we're going to jump right in. First up, here's what we're going to go over tonight. We're going to say hi because we always do. We're going to talk a little bit about some game management, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some advanced situations that maybe we hope you never have to run into, but if you do, you should be prepared for some of them. So we'll cover some of those. Just a reminder, the 9 smiling faces and several bald heads of our TBLOA training committee. If you see one of us, please say hi. We're glad you're here. A reminder, you can join us on Facebook at the Tampa Bay Lacrosse Officials Association Training Group and Men's Game Lacrosse Officials USA Group on Facebook. A couple of spaces where you can communicate with other officials and go over game scenarios. Post odd questions if you're the Harold Buck type that we may never see, but hey, we can talk about it anyway. And if you just run into a situation you want more opinions about it than you'd ever consider before, there are 1,100 people, all game officials in that national group, and it's a great place to get some opinions from outside our area. All right, we're going to jump into game management. And what is game management? Well, it's really more the art of officiating as opposed to the science of officiating, rules, mechanic, and judgment. We're talking about being a professional official, right? Keeping the game flowing, communicating effectively amongst the crew, and preventive officiating, right? Techniques that will help things go smoothly. And one of the ways that starts is with things that we do before game day, right? Crew chief communicates with your crew. Gentlemen, we have a game coming up on Wednesday at name of school. Faceoff is at 7 o'clock, so I expect everybody there by 6. We're going to take the field at 6:30. And if up here in TBLOA, our contracts now call for the schools to comply with the FHSAA policy 600. That policy says they have to give us a changing room, just like they do for the football officials and for the basketball officials. And so we have begun the process of getting and identifying those facilities in Hillsborough County and in Pinellas County. But for the other schools, crew chiefs, we're going to ask you to do that when you send your email confirming games. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll notice that I have a sample email up here. I can post that in our forms page, and you can use that when you communicate with schools, ADs, coaches, with whomever you're confirming the game at the school. But our contract this year says that each school will provide the items listed in FHSAA policy 600, and that they will make sure that we are safe. Policy 600 specifies that too, but I added a clause to our contract this year to make sure that our guys do not have safety issues going to and from their cars. So, crew chiefs, when you're asking to confirm the game, you'll notice in the middle, I say, where on campus will we find the officials parking? And where will our changing room be? If a school says, we're not offering you a changing room, I need to know about that. When they do tell you where the changing room is, let me know that too. We'll just build a database so that by the end of the season, we won't have to ask every time we go to a school. We'll have a database say, hey, this is where the parking is. This is where the changing room is. So maybe you want to park closer to the changing room if that's simpler for everybody. This is policy 600. It says that there's supposed to be an administrator who greets you, crew, when you get to a school. You need to know who the official administrator on duty is. They should greet you. They should provide a secure place for us to park, provide a dressing facility. They should provide you libation at halftime. It should be water or some sport drink or other, so that you don't get dehydrated. I still suggest bringing your own water, but they are supposed to provide you with beverages at halftime. They also have to provide a place for you to go at halftime. If you guys want to leave the field and go back to that dressing room, they're supposed to walk you back there. So you can find all of this in the officials guidebook on the FHSAA website. But we've added that to our contracts this year, guys. So you should it should be a little easier for guys who are coming directly from work and can't change at work and come half dressed to the game, and it beats drop and trow in the parking lot. I know that some of us have had to do. Make sure that we all get to keep our JLA badges instead of having somebody go, "Why are you running around in your underwear in the parking lot?" But back to prior to game day, make sure you're communicating with your crew at least 48 hours before game time. Make sure everybody's on the same page. We know where we're going to meet. We know what time we're going to meet. Because then when you show up on game day, we have a whole bunch of other things to do. We need to have a good pregame, right? You need to have a half hour to get changed and have a decent pregame. Mike and I are notorious for long pregames because I sort of need to get my head into the game that day, right? What are we doing? Are we working with a crew of guys that we've worked with a lot before? And so we know each other's tendencies. Are we working with somebody that we've not worked with before? So we want to make sure that we're very clear. This is how we're going to handle stick checks today. This is when I want to get a stick check. I want to save the first time out as a touch point for us, and we're going to wait till the second time out. See where we are at the end of the quarter. Are we going to get one at the end of the first quarter if we're not in a man up, man down situation? But those are the conversations that your crew chief should have with you during pregame. Reminder that when we've got an over and back, we're going to call yes. We're only going to yell tip if it's a tip by the defense, right? So we don't confuse our partners saying tip, but it was tipped by the offense, right? Those kinds of things. We want to remind ourselves that we're, especially for those of us doing multiple sports coming out of a new sport, right? We don't want to give the basketball signal for a push with two hands when we're doing lacrosse and it's a one-handed push, right? We're just going to talk about little things that we all know, but we sometimes need a refresher on, especially as we're jumping back into lacrosse in earnest with the regular season. Then you're going to go out to the field 30 minutes before the game. You're going to walk the field, right? Make sure that we have contiguous lines in the center, on the sidelines, and on the end lines, which are all required by rule. If we don't have contiguous center, end, and sidelines, getting out there 30 minutes before the game gives you an opportunity to go to the head coach and say, "Coach, when we are doing our pregame, coach, we have an issue with the field. We have time to address it prior to the first faceoff. If you can get it fixed, great. If you absolutely can't get it fixed, it's going to be a technical foul and you're going to lose the opening faceoff." So gives coach the opportunity to fix something minor with the field, right? Make sure we get out there. Then we're going to actually go talk to the coaches, and your crew chief is going to talk to the coach. Now, the coach's certification meeting should be attended by all of the officials. It gives the crew chief witnesses when the coach says yes to the opening line of, "Are all your players legally equipped by rule?" Right? We have to have a yes, not a "they better be, I hope so." We must have a yes or we really can't play. If the coach says, "Well, I hope so," well, I need a yes or a no, coach. Right? We're going to ask coach who his captains are today, who's his in-home, and we're going to write it down on our scorecard. If you're talking to the home coach first, "Hey, coach, are we doing a national anthem today? We're going to introduce starters. We're introducing the entire squad at some schools where they run down the entire roster of all 25 players of both squads. Great. Can we do that 5 minutes before the game so that the faceoff can start on time?"
Better.
Right. If the answer is yeah, we're going to introduce all 25 guys of both teams. Well, can we start this 5 minutes before game time so we're not putting ourselves at a time disadvantage, especially if we're doing a boys-girls situation where we've got the 5 o'clock game and the girls have the 7. We don't want to make their game late if we can help it, right? Just common courtesy. Next up, coach, we'd like your help in emphasizing sportsmanship today. We're going to enforce all the sportsmanship rules for players, coaches, and spectators, and we're going to have a zero tolerance policy for foul language. By rule, foul language on the field is unsportsmanlike conduct. Most of us have a tendency to give players a warning and then a conduct foul first. That's a game management call for you and your crew. But this is the team warning, right? You told the coach before the game, there's there came, hey, how about a warning? Hey, watch you don't get penalized, right? There's your warning. This is it. We want to remind coaches about the sideline area, right? We have a coaches area, we have a team area behind the coaches area. If you have a field that has a 6-yard coaches area and lots of space on the sideline, fantastic. Most fields you won't. So crew chief, when you walk the field, you have to figure out how much space are we going to allot for the coaches area? Is it going to be 2 yards, 3 yards? How are we going to delineate that? Are there going to be cones there? But remind the coaches area is for the coaches only. Rule 662 provides that the coaches area is restricted to coaches only during play. Players are not permitted in the coaches area. Similarly, coaches aren't allowed on the field, except for an injured player, warm up a goalie, or at halftime. During timeouts, the coach doesn't get to walk on the field and bring the players to him on the field. Coach needs to stay in the coaches area and bring the players to him. The more we get consistent about this enforcement, the fewer problems we'll have, especially as the season moves on. Right? Make sure that players are not, during the course of the game, hanging out in this 5-yard coaches area over here and using it as a staging area. This belongs to coaches. Players are not permitted in this space. They can't be here. Technically, they're supposed to enter the substitution area back here through the table area, not through this 5-yard coaches area. Now, if a player walks through that area and goes from the team area to the substitution area, we're not likely to be staring at them. But if they're hanging out in here, again, rule 662, it's a conduct foul. Just like if a coach is on the field, it's a conduct foul. Give them a warning, then take the ball away. They need to stay in their space. And while you're talking to the home coach, the game clock is counting down, coach. Are we going to 5 minutes before game time? Or is that supposed to be when the game is going to start? Because if it's when the game is going to start, we're going to want the anthem to go at 5 minutes. Right? As you look at that clock, crew chief, you're going to decide, well, I've got 24 minutes to game time. I'm going to get captains at 20 minutes, at 15 minutes, whenever you want to get them. But tell coach, we're going to get your captains when there's 20 minutes on the clock so that they're prepared. We'll talk to your face-off guys after that. Then take questions. They have questions about this year's rule changes that we covered in session 1. They may have questions about an enforcement. They may not like your conversation about the coaches area and want a clarification. Okay? By rule, the coaches area is restricted to coaches only during play. If you don't remember rule 662, just remember the language of the rule. If they say, hey, I have a question about something that happened in another game. Well, I can talk to you about a rule, but I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what happened in that game situation. So I really am not going to be a great reference there. So let's make sure that we're consistent, but that we don't throw our colleagues under the bus when we say, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. I wasn't there, so I really can't say. Steve, you had something you wanted to add?
No, I just want to unmute myself in case I want to jump back.
Okay, very good. Right. Then as we get down to the time when you're going to get the captains, in a 3-man game, the umpire is responsible for getting the home team captains. The field judge is responsible for getting the visiting team captains. According to the mechanics manual, you're supposed to get them at the corner of the box, but the odds of that happening are slim to none. You're usually still in the middle of their warm-up. Unless you're dealing with things late, the teams have already gone to their bench, and then maybe you get them at the sideline. But umpire gets the home team captains and walks them out first. Home team faces the bench. Speaking captain should be standing next to the R. Similarly, field judge gets the visiting team captains, walks them out. They face away from the table. Speaking captain next to the R. Now, R may be at left side of the field, R may be at the right side of the field. Some guys like looking at the clock, some guys don't. Some guys want to keep their face out of the sun so they can see the kids as opposed to being blinded. Whatever your R does, just go to the other side. Pretty straightforward stuff.
Hey, Dave, I'm an old curmudgeon, but when I tell my guys when they're walking them out, or if I'm walking them out, I tell them to take their right glove off so we can get a good firm handshake with the captains. That's just for my crew.
That's cool. Just remember that when players refuse to shake hands at the captain's meeting, they have that right, but you can remind them that it's not particularly sporting. They will have to shake hands during the lineup, however. That is actually a rule. But when the crew chief's getting out there, he's going to introduce the crew. I tend to introduce my crew as Mr. Elkis, Mr. X, and Mr. Y. Some guys introduce guys by first names, whatever your crew is comfortable with. Ask the captains to introduce themselves to one another. To Wayne's point, give them an opportunity to shake hands without gloves on. If there are any weird rules about this particular field, because we've got a hole over here, so we've got a cone over there, don't trip. There's a cone in the middle of the field. Some of those grass fields, those things happen. Heck, they even happen with some basketball courts around our area these days with the water intrusion and floor heaving. So anything can happen outdoors. Referee's going to show everybody the coin that they're going to use today. This is side A, this is side B, whether they call it heads or tails, or ref or tree, or whatever they, state of Florida, referee, whatever coin they happen to be using. This is the coin we're going to use today. He's going to ask the visiting team speaking captain whether he, which side of the coin he wants. Umpire is supposed to repeat that call, right? So it should be loud enough that the umpire can hear and repeat the heads or tails call. Okay. Referee should remind both teams that he's going to toss the coin in the air and catch it. In lacrosse, we catch the coin. We don't let it hit the ground, and we don't flip it over. We just catch it. If the coin doesn't flip or we don't catch it, we're going to flip it again. And he's going to flip the coin. Whichever team wins the toss gets to choose first AP or goal to defend. And if the winning team chooses first alternate possession, then the losing team gets to choose goal to defend for the first and third quarter. Referee should then have the players turn their backs to the goal that they're going to defend, facing the goal that they're attacking, and tap the team on the shoulder who won first alternate possession. And then indicate which way the teams are going to be going first and third. Remind the teams that when they come out, their goalie needs to line up with his left shoulder facing the goal that he'll be defending. Sometimes it's easier to say, hey, blue, you're going to be facing in. White, you're going to be facing out. Whichever works better for you, crew chief. Whichever you think the kids will understand better, right? Now we're going to meet with our face-off guys. Tell the captains to send their Fogos with their crosses. Okay? Bring them out to midfield. Explain how we're going to do a face-off. We've covered how we do face-offs ad nauseum during our training, so I'm not going to beat it up now, but we're going to discuss it with them. Remind them we want them to line up top to stop. We want them to get them in as quickly as possible. If they continue to require instruction into the second quarter, we're probably going to give them a violation and give their opponent the ball. So just line up right. The clearer you are about expectations, the fewer problems you'll have. Answer any questions that these guys have and send them on their way. At that point, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a good point. A couple of things you pointed out, I just want to put a little emphasis on. When you tell them to come down, like, you want to have a good, clean face-off, and you don't want to keep them down there forever. So if they listen to what you tell them, I try to sell it as a benefit. If you listen to what I tell you, I don't have to keep adjusting you. You won't be down there that long. We want to get the face-offs going. But I want them to come down together, and I want them to play the ball first, and I want them to listen to what I'm going to tell them to correct them. But I'm going to tell them, I'm not correcting you. I'm going to correct you once, twice. They're all experienced, unless it's a brand new program that has not experienced face-off guide, and you can tell. But if the kids are not listening to you and you keep correcting that same kid over and over again, that's enough. Violate them, take the ball away, he'll learn. But I'd be clear up front the expectations, and then you do your part and expect them to do their part. You'll have better face-offs.
Thank you, Steve. You make a good point. We have 5 new schools playing lacrosse in Pinellas and Pasco counties this year. So you may run into those brand new programs with guys who have never actually had a live face-off before that wasn't in practice. So you may need to take some extra time with those guys. Once you're done with face-off guys, umpire and field judge, go check the nets. You know, don't interrupt warm-ups. Ask coach if it's okay if you go check the nets, especially when they need to go fish, you know, the 20 balls that they put in the net out of the net. But go check the nets for holes. Make sure that we, you know, have good adhesion to the pipes. And if there are any problems with the nets, we immediately report that to the home team. They have an obligation to go fix it, right? And make those nets playable. If you absolutely can't get a net fixed and there's a hole that you can't repair before the game, understand you may have to sell a goal call by punching your hand through that net to say, yeah, it was in, but the ball went through this hole, right? Know that before the game. You don't want to find out that there's a hole in the net later. Similarly, just before the opening faceoff, go and check the nets again, right? If the teams are continuing to warm up, we got to go check the nets again. A, make sure that they didn't put another hole in it, but B, make sure there are no balls stuck in the net. That you don't go to, yeah, you think you have a goal, but the ball's on the side of the net, but there's the ball in the net and the ball on the side of the net because we didn't check the nets before the game. That's a whole can of worms we want to avoid. Then if you've gotten your captains out of the way early, you have a chance to go talk with the table and make sure that you have a good conversation with your scorer, with your timer. Sometimes the timer's up in the booth, so you want to make sure that the table has communication with the timer at the booth, whether it's walkie-talkie, whether it's phone. If there's an announcer, if they intend to play music during dead balls, right, you want to know that. You want to make sure they understand the signal for kill the music, right? So that when you're standing out there waving your hand over your head and they're still playing music because they figure you're not ready for a face-off yet, and you're not ready for a face-off yet because they're still playing music, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page. Do they have a horn at the table, or are they going to use the horn on the scoreboard? Either is acceptable, but the horn on the scoreboard then has to work. So does the horn at the scoreboard work? A, and does it actually go off when the clock gets to 0? And then discuss how penalty time works, right? How the timer at the table is responsible for releasing players at the conclusion of their penalties, that they are not to use alternate timing devices besides the game clock if the game clock is visible, right? You want them to write down the time that the penalty starts, do the subtraction, and this is the time that the penalty ends. Because when you get into a situation where you have a stacked penalty box, there's no way for them to run 6 different timers simultaneously. You can't start all 6 at once, right? Game clock is your best friend. So use the game clock for all your timing. Make sure they know to do that. Also, make sure that the folks at the table understand that if somebody releases from the penalty box early, they have to get a double horn blown, right, at the next dead ball so that you can address that. Anything else you guys want to talk about it? Discussion with table personnel. Mike, Steve, Wayne. Okay, moving on. Just before the face-off, we're going to have a lineup, right? Umpires and field judges, we talked about this. You should check the nets before the lineup. And
Dave,
sir.
Dave, I thought you were going to say after the table. Did you mention anything about game balls yet, or is that coming up?
No, I have it here in this slide, but you can mention it.
That's fine, as long as you have it coming up.
That's fine. Just before the lineup, right? Umpire and field judge are going to recheck the nets, make sure that they're placed properly. The back of the pipe on the back of the goal line, not on the front, but the back of the pipe on the back of the goal line, because the planes from the back of the goal line, the back of the pipes in, right? So the back of the pipe on the back of the goal line. Make sure that we have end line and sideline balls. The NFHS rule book says 16. FHSAA has modified that rule to 13. So there should be, in the FHSAA world, 4 balls on each end line, 3 balls on one sideline, and 2, one at the table and 1 in the R's hand for the first faceoff, right? So 13 instead of 16. As the teams come out for their lineup, red's facing in because they're defending the goal to the right as we're looking at it. Blue's facing out because they're defending the goal to the left as we're looking at it. Umpire and field judge are responsible for making sure the in-homes are actually in the starting lineup, right? We got in-homes from the coach when we did our coaches certification, but they must be starters. They must be on the field at the opening faceoff. So we want to make sure that our in-homes are present, right? Referee's going to give his final charge to the teams, tell the goalies to go shake hands. They retreat to their goals. Rest of the team shake hands. And then we go to our first face-off positions. Right? R becomes a single. Umpire becomes the lead left. Field judge becomes the wing. And wing. Right? Your job is to now make sure the field gets set. Make sure everybody's out of the substitution area before every face-off. Make sure players are out of the coaches area before the opening face-off. Remind them, coaches area is for coaches, not for players. Let's make sure we don't have any players in the coaches area. Clear the box. It's hard to count offsides when there are guys sitting in the box in a face-off. And then when everything's ready, signal to your partner that the field is set. And we're underway. Now, we covered play of the game last week, so we're not going to go into how we proceed from here, but we are going to start continuing our conversation about game management. Next up, we have equipment checks. Reminder, how many equipment checks are required by rule? Well, the correct answer is 1 per half. Most of us tend not to do 1 per half. We try to get 2 done in the first half and say we got our 2 done and we're good. As long as you get 2, most people don't complain. But if you have a running time game in the second half and one team's getting absolutely obliterated, you just happen to do a equipment check after a goal, you're gonna burn a couple, 30, 60 seconds between the goal and the face-off so that the team that's getting obliterated doesn't get obliterated worse. And so you can't do a stick check now. Sure I can, coach. I'm required to do 1 per half. But the clock's running. It's a running time game, coach. Try not to check sticks if you have a flag down or there are players in the penalty box. Right? Basically, you'd be pouring gasoline on a fire and nobody needs that. Right. So we're going to do 2 checks randomly per game. The single at the time of the stick check is going to get the ball, right? Try and get the ball. Lead and trail are going to get a player from the bench closest to them. Right. And say, number 31, don't touch your stick. Come here and hand me your cross. Right. We want it. First thing we want to say is don't touch your stick. Because if the first thing they do is they jam it into the ground or they pull the strings, they're getting an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. So we want to tell them right away, don't touch your stick. First thing we want to say, don't touch your stick. So that we can, preventive officiating, right? If he does, well, you got to throw a flag for unsportsmanlike conduct and still do the stick check. Got to check all of his equipment, though. This is high school. We're doing a full equipment check. So check for mouth guard. Make sure the eye black is legal, right? That's a point of emphasis this year. We should have already caught any illegal eye black. But again, we want to look for it. Make sure they're wearing athletic shoes, that they've got shoulder pads, that their elbow pads are on their elbows, not on their triceps, right? Must wear their equipment properly. Then, right, you just talked about this. Then we're going to proceed to actually check sticks. Single gives the ball to the R. Umpire and field judge are holding sticks, facing the benches, keeping eyes on the inmates, as Steve likes to say. R will measure 1 stick, while the U or the FJ, whose stick is not being measured, does a rollout tests. If there are any illegal sticks, it's the R's job to flag it and report the penalty. Right? Don't ever throw sticks. We penalize players for throwing sticks. We shouldn't throw sticks either. If you can't hand a stick back to a player or to a coach, lay it gently on the ground, let them come get it, but don't throw sticks. Generally, I'll put them between the wing line and the sideline, right around the substitution cone. So right in that space, here you go, guys, come get your sticks. If there's a foul, well, that's a different story. Then the crew chief's got to go report that. Okay. Reminder, we're checking the pocket depth to make sure we don't see the top of the ball underneath the bottom of the sidewall. Ball has to roll out. Right? Top, sides, and bottom. Head has to be 10 inches or longer from the top to the ball stop. You don't measure the foam when you measure those 10 inches. Has to be at least 6 inches wide at the top. All shooting strings have to be within 4 inches of the top of the head. If you have one of those pretty scorecards that are shaped just right. You can put it through to make sure you get your 3 and 3.5 inch measurements at the right spots from the throat of the stick. Otherwise, you got to measure it all the way up. Okay. Reminder for youth games. 12 and 14U use the same length sticks, 40 to 42 for shorts, 52 to 72 for long poles. You know, same as high school. 10Us, their short sticks can be 37 to 42, and their long poles only 47 to 54 if you're using a 10U format that allows long poles.
Hey,
Right.
David.
Sir.
There was a change last year where we were trying to get off of the sidelines and away from the substitution area when we were doing these stick checks. What's the best practice these days as to a location where the crew should be doing these stick checks?
Stick check should be done between the wing line and midfield. No closer than the wing line. If you have an issue where you've got lots of eyes on you and people are chirping at you about, especially if you've had a violation on a stick check earlier in the game, I'd be closer to midfield. First one of the game, I'm probably doing closer to the wing line because it's easier for my guys to not have to come in and out so much, right? Trying to save steps for the crew, especially early in a contest. But if you have an issue with the first stick check, when you do the second stick check, get halfway to midfield, buy yourself some space away from the players.
Good.
If you do have a penalty on a stick check, right, you can explain what the violation is, but you do not demonstrate what the violation is. You just say the ball didn't roll out. You don't show them that the ball didn't roll out. You say the pocket's deep. You don't show them that the pocket's deep. Right? Just in case while you were handling the stick, the strings changed. When you checked it, it was illegal. It's illegal. Here's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee as soon as you hand them the stick, they're going to be, let me see it. They're going to try it. And they're going to manipulate it. It doesn't matter at that point, right? You already have one. If you're doing 8U 4-on-4, no long poles. If you're doing 8U 7-on-7, you may have long poles depending on your format and your league. So if you have a nice measuring tape, you might want to go and mark all those fun numbers in black for high school and in blue for youth. Makes them easier to find. You don't have to try and remember them all. You just have to look for lines. Just a reminder, if somebody has strings hanging longer than 2 inches off the side, that's a fix-it ticket, right? You tell them, hey, your strings are too long. You need to cut these before you can bring this cross back into play. If there's no end cap, it has to be an end cap manufactured for lacrosse. It can't be a bottle cap. It can't be a coin. It doesn't have to be a rubber round one. It can be one of the inserts as long as it was manufactured for lacrosse for that particular shaft. That's legal. But the absence of an end cap is you must put a regulation end cap on here. You can't play with this cross. Just remember that Fogos may not have tape touching the throat or the head of their cross. Other players can. In college, you can't. In high school, you can. At youth, you can. If there's a tape ring, right, can't be more than 3 inches from the butt end. And just remember the shaft of the cross has to be relatively straight. If from repeated stick checking, the cross now has a sick bend to it, that's not legal and they've got to replace the shaft. All right.
So Dave, you mentioned early on when you had a discussion with the coaches on the timeouts, you want them at the bench and the players go to the bench. So here's an example where little things make a big difference. So if you don't enforce that and you're doing a stick check, you want to do it about the wing line where you said, or from the wing line towards the center line. You want the players away from the benches, players from the benches away from each other, and then also from us. So why it's a good thing when you have a discussion early on. That's one of the reasons why you do that. You want them to separate from each other, the teams from each other, and then also from us. That's our working space. So when they come to the table for the timeout, when you do the stick check, you're gonna coach stay at the sideline. Let the players come to you. You don't want them, out at the hash marks. So keep them on the sidelines. So that'll help you manage your game a little bit better. Little things make a big difference.
Thanks, Steve. If you have chosen the stick of the most recent goal scorer between the time of the scoring of the goal and its subsequent face-off. If that's the person whose stick you've chosen and they have a deep pocket, they have an altered stick, they adjust the stick with that, you tell them not to touch the head of your stick, but they still grab the strings or jam it into the ground. That can wipe a goal. Only the goal scorer, an illegal cross by the goal scorer between the scoring of the goal and its subsequent face-off can wipe a goal. Once the next face-off has happened, even if you get that guy the next time at a timeout that occurs right after the face-off, once the face-off happens, the goal's good.
Hey, Dave, it's Wayne. Can you go over, since we're in game management, coaches' requests for stick checks and the consequences if it's good and how many they can get per game?
Well, sure. First off, a coach may have as many equipment checks during a game as they would like. They get one for free, meaning if you ask for an equipment check on a player and it is found that all of that equipment is legal, okay, you got one. If you ask for an equipment check and anything is illegal, well, you get as many of those as you want. But if you've already used one where the equipment was found to be legal and you ask for another one and the equipment is once again found to be legal, you're charged a timeout. If you don't have a timeout, you're charged a delay of game penalty. If you were entitled to the ball, you'll lose it. If you weren't entitled to the ball, then you've got a 30-second foul if your opponent had possession. If it was a face-off pending, you'd lose the face-off, right? So you can get as many as you like, but they can't say, I want you to check that stick. They have to designate a player by number. They can designate a player who's on the bench. That player may have 3 sticks. Well, it's whatever stick you happen to ask him for at that moment in time. But you do a full equipment check, just like you do when you grab somebody. So you have a mouth guard. This is eye black league. So you're wearing his shoulder pads, arm pads on his elbows, right? Go through the same check that you would go through otherwise. There are some weird stuff with equipment checks, though. So let's say we have a situation where there was a goal scored, and prior to the face-off, coach asks for an equipment check on the goal scorer because we hadn't chosen the goal scorer to do a random check at that moment, but it's a close game. Coach decides he needs to try and get that goal taken off the board, so he asks for an equipment check on the goal scorer. Also happens that we had a flag down, slow whistle pending against the defense there for a technical foul. So if we have a flag down on B, A scores, it's a technical foul, it's going to wipe out the goal. So we've already signaled goal was good, flag's waved off by the goal's good, and then coach asks for an equipment check on the goal scorer. And we find an illegal cross, which wipes out the goal. Well, that also has the side effect of reinstating that technical foul, because the only reason the technical foul got wiped out was because there was a goal scored. Well, now if there's no goal scored, right, we have a flag down for the, and that flag down gets reinstated. Okay, you have a live ball foul and you have a dead ball foul. Both now have to serve, right? So you've got the 30-second penalty is going to serve. The 2-minute stick penalty is going to serve, but the stick penalty is a dead ball foul, right? So technically they are not simultaneous fouls, but they're live ball, dead ball. They are adjudicated at the same time. So although the two-minute foul for an illegal stick is always non-releasable, the 30-second foul is going to be non-releasable also because they're adjudicated at the same time. So that's a weird one. It happens rarely, but we need to be aware of that. Crew chief, when you're reporting an illegal stick, chuck your flag as high as you possibly can, then report the penalty using C note. Got an illegal cross. If it's the pocket, point to the head of the cross. Explain the illegality, but do not demonstrate it. If you get to be one of those lucky few who ended up picking 2 illegal crosses, 1 for each team, those are considered simultaneous fouls. And then we have to figure out who had the ball, Right, somebody had the ball, they're going to keep it because we're going to have penalties of equal length, right? Each one's going to get a 2-minute stick foul. So whoever had the ball or was entitled to possession was going to keep it. If a face-off is pending, we're going to face off, right? The only reason we would go to alternate possession is if absolutely nobody had the right to possession. So we had to kill the play on a loose ball for an injury, right? And we would have gone to AP anyway in that situation. If you have a situation where the fouls are different lengths because you've got something else going on, then, right, we're going to have a team with the least amount of penalty time starting with. Okay, moving on, communication. We talked about communicating with partners in previous sessions and today a little bit, but today we're going to talk more about communicating with players and coaches. And how you communicate with each of these constituencies is going to go a long way to determine how well they communicate with you. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to start with communications with players. Avoid addressing the players by using anything perceived as pejorative, right? Don't say son, kid, bud. I tend to refer to everybody as sir. Or I'll refer to them by their number. When sir doesn't work, hey, 8, hey, 8. Here's the ball. Ball's gonna be over here. If I'm talking to the goalie, keeper, keep, goalie. But when you're trying to get your restarts going and 31, pick up the ball, please. Okay. You got 5 seconds, pick up the ball, 31. Right, we need to get this game moving. Captains can be your best friends in dealing with problem players, right? Let them help you rein in their teammates. As Mike Doyle likes to say, they know who their knuckleheads are. Let them handle the knuckleheads so you don't have to. I will tell a captain, you handle it before I have to handle it. If I have to handle it, my only tools are flags and whistles. And that reduces everybody's good time. So again, preventive officiating goes a long way toward avoiding difficulties later. Steve, Wayne, what are your tricks for talking with players?
Well, I talk to them all the time and treat them with respect. I call them by number, always treat them with respect. When during the course of the game, little things, goalie clears the ball. I consider the goalie like a shooter, and I just say, I'm right here, I'm here. So I'm not saying much, but the guy who's riding the goalie hears the voice and goes, oh, the official's right there, must be listening. I talk to him all the time. If he's the pole's coming down hard with the slash, I'll say, be smart, get stick. Some guys don't like to say that. But I keep talking to them. It just makes your presence known. And they tend to not get as out of control as they would if they don't think you're paying attention. Yeah, just hustle, get the ball. Ball's right here. Here's the restart. Goal. Here's the restart. You see the ball. Those little things are important.
I will say one thing that's a pet peeve. I'm just like Steve. I talk to the players a lot. But on a face-off, the two guys are battling, and you have one official saying, get it out, work it out, work it out. Well, the guy's not getting a massage. Just let them battle and don't say anything to them. What the hell you think they're doing? Of course they're trying to get the ball out. You telling them to get the ball out is not going to help them out at all. So I don't like to talk to the kids when there's a ground ball. I don't yell, play the ball or any of that stuff. I just call what I see, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Excellent. To Steve's point, when I'm trail and goalie has the ball in the crease and I'm doing the 4 count, as soon as he steps out of the crease entirely, I'll tell him, goalie, you're out. Right? He knows his 4 seconds over. He's probably not watching his feet. He's trying to make sure he doesn't get blown up. When he throws a pass, ball's away. Lets all those attackmen know that you're watching, to Steve's point. If they know somebody's watching, they're less likely to do something dumb. Cool. All right. Then how do we communicate with coaches? We want to treat both coaches the same way. I usually refer to coaches by coach. Even if I know their name, Even if I worked their game 2 days ago and I know who they are. I just refer to both coaches as coach, and it's generally preferable to using their first name. If you know one first name and not the other, I end up getting a phone call from somebody saying, oh, they were calling my opponent by his first name the whole game. They clearly know who he is. They were showing favoritism. We don't need that, right? If you just refer to everybody as coach, it's a lot simpler. Please remember that if the head coach is talking to you, he's doing one of two things. He's either asking you a question or he's venting. In general, those are one of the two things he's doing, right? If the coach is giving you it's a foul, it's a push, that's a cross check, he's venting. If on the other hand, he says, how is that not a foul? Well, coach, it's not a push, you got him in the shoulder. He's allowed to push your guy from the side. You can push him from the other side too if he wants, but it wasn't from the rear, right? You can give him a quick answer. You give him a lighthearted answer, as long as you're not taking your focus and your time away from live play, right? If coach asks a question, however, in a respectful way, we need to give him an answer. Even if the answer is, coach, I don't know, I'll ask my partner exactly what he saw on that call, and I'll let you know at the next dead ball, next time I'm back. Or I'll ask him to tell you when he's over here, right? When coaches say, hey, that wasn't called our last game, no one's called that all year. We know coaches are 100% honest, right? No one's called that on us all year. The best response is, I can't talk about previous games, but this is how we're calling the game today. Right? That's the rule. That's how we're going to enforce it. It's better when everybody's consistent and we all enforce the rules, especially when it comes to things like contiguous sidelines, end lines, and center lines before the game. Coach, I need you to fix this, or it's going to be a pregame technical foul. Right? When we do that in the first game and we do that in the second game, we don't have a crew showing up for the fifth game saying nobody's called that all year. And if he says that, you know that your colleagues called it. You know they did. You trust that they called it. Coach, I can't tell you what happened 3 games ago, but I can tell you they need to be contiguous or it's going to be a violation. If you go to Academy of the Holy Names, they don't have a center line that runs all the way across the field because they've got a pretty logo and the AD won't let them put chalk over the logo. Head coach will say, yep, I know I lose the opening faceoff. He knows it's his situation. He just lives with it. Right? But they understand. The more consistent we are, the better. Recognize though that, good, Mike.
If you haven't spent the time on the USA Lacrosse website where they had those videos, probably from somebody that does multiple sports, the training that USA Lacrosse has put into understanding the communication aspect with coaches has really helped me a lot of times, because I was basically, all my training with basketball was to show up to the field, keep my mouth shut, and more importantly, silence can't be quoted. And I think that's probably the most important thing, right? As we go as referees, if we can't explain something and we call something, that puts us in a tough spot. And I think a lot of times that silence can't be quoted. You don't want to put yourself in a tough spot and backtracking and making up excuses at why you made your call and saying that you know the rules when you may not be able to quote page and number. So I'd be really careful with what comes out of your mouth. Again, silence can't be quoted. But again, the emotion aspect of our game is really important. And we know as sports officials that once we get that ball back in play, things tend to settle down a little bit, but also pump the brakes a little bit, own yourself, own your humanity, but also respect the humanity out there. And we talk about that. It's the best part of this game is we respect the game, we respect each other. The coaches are part of our solution. They're not part of the problems. They are humans. Listen to them, but be careful with the words that come out of your mouth.
Good advice. Remember that when a coach asks a question, you do have to give him an explanation. He may not like it, but at some point, if he keeps on and on about, coach, I've given you an explanation. We need to move on. If it can, coach, it's my job to inform you, not convince you. If that continues, coach, I can only explain it to you, I can't understand it for you. At that point, you think you sort of made your point. But let's remember that, coaches are getting paid to coach just like we're getting paid to referee. They want answers to questions, but if it's not a question, it doesn't necessarily require a response. When you are speaking with coaches, let's make sure that we don't take our focus away from the field, right? We have to keep our eyes on the players at all times. So if you can stand next to the coach and have a conversation sideways while you're watching the field, great. Stay calm. Maintain an even tone of voice, right? Be professional. If you can't be professional, be funny. If you can't be funny, limit your words. But remember Joe Friday from Dragnet, just the facts. Try not to inject emotions into it. This is, how is that not a push? It was contact from the side. Contact from the side is legal. It was above the waist and below the shoulders. And he pushed him on the arm. It wasn't his back, it was his shoulder. We're moving on. How is that a cross check? Well, he hit him with the portion of the stick that was between his hands with a thrusting motion. That's a cross check. Now, you can always get to what a cross check is, right? But easier if you just say, that was the motion, right? Easy. We've talked about this several times already. Statements do not require answers, right? So that call was awful is about the call. You're an awful official is something that can't be ignored, right? That's a bad call. That's a matter of opinion, right? You're an awful official is now become a personal attack, and we can't ignore that. The first time that happens, coach, I'm not putting up with that, coach. That's enough. If it's about you, if it's about your partner, flag it. You can decide whether you want to flag it if it's about you. I usually give them a warning if it's about me, but I don't take warnings. I don't give warnings if somebody says something about my partner. Do try and avoid being sarcastic. I do not succeed at this. I'm working on it. When coach says that was a terrible call, nope, that was a terrible play. Be a better coach. Yeah, I have to avoid doing that. I admit it. But that was a terrible call can be ignored. Just move on. Wayne, what do you have there?
Listen, everybody's got to have their own style. I know when I was a new official, I would listen to the older officials and the more experienced ones, and you kind of develop your own banter with the coaches. I'm a big fan of the game on the official side is won or lost in the pregame, so I try and find something in common with the coach, whether it's how long you're coaching, how long you've been down here. If you moved here from a state that I'm familiar with, oh my gosh, I know so and so, or so you try and put them at ease. But one of my favorites is, if I've got a coach that's begging, that's a ward, that's a hold, that's a slash, and he's just begging for calls. I said, Coach, you're going to make me go to my car at halftime and get my McDonald's cup so I can give it to you so you can beg for change too.
Yeah.
So,
You go ahead.
After you, Steve.
No, I have a level of tolerance, and it depends on the coach. If the coach is a good coach and he knows what he's talking about, just like the level of play, if the level of play is better, you tend to let small things go because it's a better level of game. You don't call every little nitpicking thing. So if the coach is experienced, he's got something to say, I tend to listen to it more often. If you have a coach that's obviously not experienced, I'm probably less tolerant. I'm going to give him less rope, and I'll talk to him. And I coach, it's enough. And then, that's enough. And then we're going to start to decide at what point he's not getting it. And then I have to do what I have to do to get him in line. So you got to listen, got to understand the game, the level of game, the coach's experience. And if it's getting personal, then absolutely it's got to be fouled and penalized. But you have to get a sense of, and then, they're saying he's called, that was an awful call. They're also working it. And you also have to understand as a senior official on the game, if you have a younger official, that ref's riding that younger official, get the younger official away from the coach because he's just working them. So you have to understand what's going on in the game.
Thank you, Steve. When you do get questions, make sure you answer it. It's okay to say, Coach, I didn't see that. I didn't see it that way. From my angle, that's not what I saw. It's okay to say I missed a call, because we all miss calls, right? There are only 3 of us and there are 20 of them on the field. We can't see everything. Coach, if it happened the way you described it, then I missed it. Right? Sometimes they just want to be heard. Say, Coach, I didn't have a good look from this angle, but my partner was right there. Right? Don't make something up. You didn't see it, you didn't see it. You gain a lot of credibility with the coach when you say, Coach, I was looking over here. You know, I was sticking with the shooter to make sure he didn't get blown up. I didn't see what happened behind the goal. Or, Coach, I was sticking with your goalie to make sure your goalie didn't get blown up on the clear. I didn't see what happened 25 yards up the field that my partner was covering from the single. But I'll ask him what he saw, and I'll let you know.
So in the pregame, one of the things I require of my crewmates is the hustle and be in position. So it looks like these two, the official and the coach, are the coach. The officials obviously trail. It's the far bench side, and maybe if there's a disputed call on the end line, and the lead official is not on the end line, he's up by the GLE, and the call's at the end line, and he's giving me a rash of shit because, you know, what did he call? It's hard to defend you. I'll never throw you under the bus, but it helps that official there that if there's an end line call and you're on the end line, and he's giving me, this is my ball, it's my, you know, he got the call wrong. Coach, he's right there. He's in the best spot he could be. So part of that pregame is hustle, be in position, and helps the whole crew out, and then helps with communicating with the coaches. He's where he's supposed to be. He had the best view of the play. You know, we can't see. I'm sitting right next to you. I can't see any better than you can. We're 85 yards away.
And in this situation, my guess is lead had a loose ball technical foul and signaled with his back to the benches, and they couldn't see what he signaled. Trail couldn't see what he signaled. Could only determine which way he pointed the ball, right? So what did he call there? Not sure, but I'll find out what he had. You know, if I could see what he signaled, I would clearly be saying, Coach, he had a loose ball hold. But if I can't see the signal either because my partner didn't signal it back towards the field, signaled it towards the end line because that's the way he was running. Okay. Yeah, he knew what his call was. We'll figure it out.
The other times, sometimes after a face-off, because the single is now far side, and the single will have a face-off violation, and you didn't see it, and the coach will say, "What did he have? I don't know. He had it, and he's far side. I'll find out, or next time he's around here, I'll have him come talk to you." So that's another, another situation where, as a wing official, you might not know what happened on the face-off.
He had a hold. He wasn't touching him. You know, Coach, he had pinned his stick to the ground. Oh, okay. But we don't know that until we have that conversation, right? So that's a good point, Steve. All right. Sometimes it's just, was that line from Cool Hand Luke? Some men you just can't reach. So at some point, you know, Coach, you made your point. You've had your say. We're going to move on. We're going to just go on with the rest of the game. I'm not changing my call. You're not changing my mind. We're just moving on, right? You have a whole lot of tools you can use when you get to that point, though. Coach, that's enough. Coach, if this continues, it's going to hurt your team. I mean, we have conduct fouls and we have unsportsmanlike conduct fouls if we need to go there, right? But talking coaches off the ledge makes for a smoother game. And there will come a time, and you will have a game at some point, and we hope it doesn't happen a lot, where a coach will lose the privilege of having an open line of communication. Coach, I am no longer speaking with you. It's not helping the game. And, you know, reminder, we should only be having these conversations with head coaches, right? We should not be having any type of negative interactions with an assistant coach. By rule, only the head coach shall communicate with the officials. But if an assistant comes to me with a respectful question, I will give the assistant coach a respectful answer. If the assistant coach comes to me in a disrespectful tone, I will remind the head coach that the assistant is there to assist him and not us, and that communication should go through him and not through his assistants, right? I'm reminded of a game where Ryan Fitzgibbons just looked at assistant coach and said, "Coach, you aren't allowed to speak to us. Have your head coach do it." And the assistant coach continued, "I don't see why I can't talk to you." Well, because it's a rule and I told you not to. Here's your flag. We tried, right? Ryan tried to keep him out of trouble and he just decided to keep putting himself there. So at some point, we have flags, we have to use them. All right. Any other comments on communication with coaches? Okay, we're gonna get into some advanced situations here. At all times, take care of your crew, protect your crew. Never throw your partner under the bus. This is not a fun view when you're standing out there and one of your partners, I have no idea what he's calling. No. It's hard to tell from where we are is a great line. You know, he's got a better angle. We're 65, 70 yards away from the play. Coach, we don't have a great angle over here. We'll find out. But remember, if you tell a coach that you're going to get him an answer, you are now obligated to get him an answer. Okay? Whether you talk to your partner to dead ball and we haven't rotated, so you're going back to the same spot, coach, here's what he saw on that call. Or if you do rotate, hey, Mike, I need you to go talk to White's coach because he wanted to know what you had on that loose ball push down in the corner. Okay? Or on that non-push call that coach thought should have been a push call, right? What did you have? Can you explain what you saw, right? You should be able to defend your call in 2 sentences. So it should be easy, right? Advanced situations. Here's hoping this doesn't happen to you. It happened to me opening night of the year. I know it's happened to several of our officials last year. We had more than our share of fights. But preventive officiating, right, goes a long way. You see guys are starting to lose their temper a little bit. Get with your captains. Guys, you told me before the game you're going to take care of your knuckleheads. I can see some things getting out of hand. Can you help me with that? Right? But if you do have a fight, everybody has a job to do. Right? Single and lead. You're sprinting in, blowing your whistle, tweet to tweet to tweet, and you're yelling. 22 blue, 4 gold, knock it off. Yelling out the numbers, they're probably not going to hear you. They're too busy, too much testosterone, right? They're seeing red. They're not listening to anything except the voice in their head saying, must kill opponent. But by you repeating the numbers out loud, it's going to help you remember the number when cooler heads do finally prevail, right? Trail, your job. Freeze the benches. Hands up. Freeze. Everybody hold still. Coaches, control your bench. Anybody who gets past you, this imaginary red line, is automatically ejected. They must be ejected by rule. Coach, player, doesn't matter. If they come off the benches during a scrape, they are ejected. Whoever throws punches in the middle of that scrum that lead and single are going to have, they're ejected. But 4 or 5 ejections, it can happen. Have a stacked box, it'll happen. Fights is when it usually does, right? So once everything gets settled and you finally are able to get these guys to knock it off, and Trail has done a good job of freezing the benches, we send the players to their benches. Trail, do not walk over to your partners till all the players are at their benches. Don't turn your back on 2 benches full of players. Right? The two guys behind you will make sure the guys get off the field, but you make sure that everybody stays in their benches. Once all of the players are off the field, the three of you can have a conversation between the wing line and midfield line where at least two of you are staring at the benches. Right? And then start going through your numbers. Who threw punches? Who left the bench? What fouls, if any, precipitated it? Right? We're going to have multiple fouls, more than likely. They're all getting adjudicated at the same time, but you may have had some sequence here. Right? So in what order did things happen? Use the back of your scorecard. Write all this stuff down. Right? It started because white 8 cross-checked the guy in the back. Blue 7 decided to stick up for his teammate and came in with a push. So he's got an unsportsmanlike conduct foul. And then the original cross-checker didn't like getting pushed, so he threw a punch, and then the pusher threw a punch, and now we've got ejections and multiple fouls. If we write it all down, it's a lot easier for your crew chief to go and report all the fouls at once. Now, we also have to do a report. Once we get everybody in the penalty box and we resume play, when that game is over, you have to call your assigner, call your association president. We had a fight. We had multiple ejections. I'm giving you a heads up. I will write this up and email it to you before I go to bed tonight. You and your crew. Write it up, circulate it amongst the crew. Make sure we got all our facts right. TBLOA, send it to Sal and send it to me. We are going to edit it for grammar. Right? We're going to check for, you got to get players' names out of the book before you leave the field. Sometimes it's easiest to do it before the game is over, right? After you put the guys in the penalty box, go to the scorer, say, I need 7's name, I need 8's name, I need 16's name. And from the other team, I need 22, I need 4, and I need 12, please. I need their last names. Put that on your card so that it can all go in your report. After you've sent us a narrative and we approve the narrative, you then have to go on to FHSAA's central hub in Arbiter and file a form AT6-UC for unsportsmanlike conduct. Right? Any questions about fights? Looks like we've got some stuff in the chat.
Yeah, we had some activity happening there. The reality there of guys leaving the sidelines, and it's kind of gray, kind of not gray, right? Did one team jump out? The other team didn't jump out. Kind of where the tensions right there. So give me that hard line, David, again, as far as how far these guys got onto the field in terms of a hard yes or a hard no.
Right. So think about where you are as trail, right? You're somewhere between the wing line and the top of the box. I sort of draw this imaginary red line here on the screen, right? I've got this line here. This is sort of the line in the sand, if you will, right? If players get that far, they're getting ejected. Now, does that mean that the guys on the far bench get a little extra space? Yeah, it does, because they're further away from the fight in this case, right? So they're not actually throwing any gasoline on the fire by stepping 1 foot, 2 yards onto the field. Whereas guys who are on the near side, the bench closer, definitely could be, because there are other players out here, right? So guys coming onto the field are a greater threat from the bench that's closer to the altercation, right? So I have this angled line where I've got my hands up, and I'm just like, I'm not facing the sideline straight. I've got to face both benches. So I'm at an angle. So I sort of pick a line parallel to me, and if they get that far, they're gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you have ejections, you report them to the table. Remember, ejection fouls for players are 3-minute fouls. You need to notify both coaches that any player has been ejected. So if a player for blue gets ejected, you have to notify blue's coach first, then white's coach that a blue player has been ejected. If you have ejections for both teams, sometimes it's easier for the crew chief to go report the fouls to the table, and for the crew chief to send one official to each bench to go inform the coaches of what's going on, what the penalties are going to be. how it's going to go. Crew chief can report it to the table. And you know the table's going to have questions because there are going to be multiple fouls. And you may not be able to determine sequence, and you definitely may have simultaneous fouls you got to deal with. At a minimum, you're going to be adjudicating it at the same time. So you're going to have some penalties that are going to be locked in for some period of time beyond just the 3-minute ejection foul, right? So bear that in mind. Always pays to review Rule 721D, which are releasability rules for fouls that are adjudicated at the same time, whether they're simultaneous fouls or not simultaneous fouls. If they're adjudicated at the same time, those releasability rules come into play. To reiterate, once you get calm restored, teams must go to their benches. Crew's going to come out here to the middle of the field, 2 guys facing in, watching the benches while the crew discusses everything that went on, writing it all down. All 3 of you write it on your card. Somebody's card gets erased by sweat or pencil. Between then and the end of the game, you have 3 copies of it. One of them should survive till the end of the game. Crew chief is the one who's going to report all these fouls to the table unless the crew chief specifically designates somebody else. Right? Sometimes the crew chief has a hard time wrapping his head around it, but umpire or field judge got it cold. They got all of it. They understand it. They get it. Yeah, Mike, I got it. I'll go take it to the table if you want. Yeah, thanks. That's a big help. Great. I'm happy to do it. But otherwise, referee talks to the table. If he wants to send the rest of the crew out to the benches to communicate with the coaches and give them more of an explanation as to what's what, that's great. But we do not restart the game until the officials, both head coaches, and the table personnel know the entirety of the penalty situation and where the restart's going to be and who's getting the ball. Everybody has to be on the same page. They don't have to like it. They just have to understand what's going on. In fact, neither head coach is apt to like it. But remember that when the game is over, you must send a report to your assigner and to your association president ahead of filling out the AT6. Do not fill out the AT6 until told by your association president and or assigner that it's okay to file, that your narrative passes, right? Anything else on fights, panel?
Get them before they happen if you can. Sometimes they're impossible to get, but sometimes you know the tone of the game. It's getting out of hand. You want to clamp down on it. Throw a lot of flags, cleaned up before if possible. Sometimes it's just not possible.
The other piece of advice I'd like to throw in about fights is only separate players if it can be done without endangering your safety or that of any other players. There was a video from South Florida last year where there was an altercation on the field that got out of hand, and one of the officials grabbed one of the players and pulled him away, and in the process tripped while he was holding on to a player, and it looked like he tried to do a WWE wrestling move on him. But literally, he lost his balance and was just holding on to the kid for dear life, but they both went down because of it. Avoid putting hands on the players if you can. I find that a Fox 40 in somebody's ear hole is terribly disorienting. So as you're running in and blowing your whistle, telling them to knock it off, keep blowing your whistle.
Loud, loud. Just blow the whistle loud. It's like throwing water on fighting dogs. Just keep blowing that whistle.
You get a whistle in your ear, like I said, it's very disconcerting, especially when it starts echoing inside that helmet. So use your whistle loud, staccato, vary your whistle cadence, whatever you need to do to get people's attention, to get them to stop. Sometimes you may not be able to, and they're just throwing haymakers at each other. Don't put yourself in harm's way. They've got padding, you don't.
Right? This is a good time to know that site or field administrator that you were supposed to meet before the game, because you might want to have that person around at the bench to help keep the peace for what's going to happen after this. So whatever happened, but you want to make sure it doesn't escalate to anything else. So there should be a field administrator there. I always like to know that they're there where they're going to be and have them around, especially for situations just like this.
There is an FHSAA policy modification to the NFHS rules when it comes to ejections. And that is that we must make adults leave the facility, but a student is confined to the bench area. Even if there is adequate personnel to supervise that student in the locker room, under FHSA policy, the student is not removed from the sideline, but rather confined to the bench.
Hmm.
An adult, on the other hand, must leave the immediate playing facility outside the stadium. Standing in the locker room watching from the door does not count. Standing at the gate watching from the gate does not count. Must leave the immediate playing facility. Their night's done.
Here's a question. So if they have only one head coach and he's ejected, or if there's a head coach and assistant and they ran on the field and they both got ejected, can that team continue to play without a coach? Or can like an assistant athletic director that's on site act as a head coach, or what do you do in that situation?
Yes, the assistant athletic director can act as the head coach in that situation.
But can they play without a coach, or they need to have a coach?
At that point, there is no provision for a forfeiture. You should discuss with the site administrator whether or not the game should be suspended.
Yeah.
Especially if it's the home team's personnel who have been ejected. My guess is they will find somebody to act as the head coach for the balance of the game rather than suspend the contest. But that's a conversation that should be handled with the site administrator. I would err on the side of suspending the game without any adult supervision for the children.
Hmm.
Right? If there's no adult on the sideline, you've got a sideline of exclusively high school students. I don't think we should have a contest there. I think we should suspend the game and get guidance from the state on how we should proceed and when that game should resume. That's how I would handle it. Okay, mistakes. We all make mistakes. We're all human. None of us has ever called a perfect game, as much as we'd like to think we can. We've come close, but I've never had one. But what kind of mistakes do we have? Sometimes we misapply a rule.
Dave, you need to
misunderstand a
work.
rule.
You need to work with me. You have a perfect one.
Hope springeth eternal, Wayne. Sometimes mistakes happen because we're out of position. Sometimes it's lack of focus, right? We get into a game that's way out of hand, and sometimes we lose our focus. Sometimes we just don't see what happened, right? Because we either weren't paying attention, we weren't looking at the right spot, or we were looking at the right spot and we didn't see what happened because we were looking at exactly the right spot. And still something could happen. Witnessed the national semifinal a couple of years ago. Both officials were in exactly the right spot, looking at exactly the right things. One gets screened and they miss a crease violation because the officials were doing exactly what they were supposed to do in exactly the right spot, but got screened at the last second and missed a crease violation. It can happen. If we learn from our mistakes, though, they can become a positive. Let's remember that how we handle our mistakes also has a huge impact on our game management, right? If we know we've made a mistake, and it's a big mistake, something that's not as simple as, hey, I point my error, I said white, I pointed the wrong way, it is white, or I pointed the correct way but said the wrong color, right? Own it, first of all. But if it's a big mistake, huddle as a crew, and let's fix it, right? If it's fixable under the rules.
Can you go back, going back to the, you pointed the wrong way. So if you point the wrong way or you say the wrong color and the teams are already substituting based on what they thought was right, you got to give them a few seconds to get the right personnel on the field if you made that mistake. And we've all done that.
Yeah, 20 seconds to substitute after a mistake is pretty straightforward. But let's face it, if one of your partner makes a huge error and you know it, let's try not to show them up. Let's blow our whistle. Let's kill it. Let's fix it as quickly as we can. Right. But let's own the error. we made a mistake. Yeah, coach, my mistake. I've got to be better. Right? A smooth sea never made a skillful sailor, right? If everything always went well, none of us would learn anything. We tend to learn best from our mistakes. So here's a common one. Green's offsides. I got a flag for offsides. Wait a minute. That's offense has the ball here. That's just a turnover, right? So I got an inadvertent flag. It's still offsides. We're going this way, right? That's an easy one. My mistake. It's an inadvertent flag. Green is still offsides. We're going this way. Really easy. Now we're going to get in 20 seconds to substitute, just like because of the error. Whereas this would have been a quick restart otherwise because of the error. Give them 20 seconds to substitute, right? Performance after critical error, or PACE, is how we handle what we've made an error, how we handle it, and how we move on from it, right? So we talked about this already. We acknowledge it. We discuss the error with the crew. We explain the mistake and how we're going to fix it. We give them 20 seconds to substitute and we restart. We move on, right? The longer we dwell on the error, the more that error gets magnified. Thoughts on error correction?
Keep it short and sweet, move on. Own up and own it and just, explain it and then go.
Cool. So we've talked about professionalism a lot, and let's talk a little bit about the 7 C's that make up a professional official.
Dave, can I have one more situation to this?
You may, sir.
I think I actually called you after the game. So can you go over? So a lot of teams call timeouts and they get their allotted, 120 seconds, but a team can call a timeout just for possession and say, I'm ready to play. I'm ready to play. So can you take it from there?
Sure. A team that calls timeout is entitled to up to 120 seconds of timeout between the time the timeout is granted and the time we restart play, right? So you call timeout in your standard situation, the teams run to their benches, you've got your 100 seconds of timer, it goes off, you give them a 20-second tweet, we restart 20 seconds after the tweet. But in Wayne's scenario, coach, timeout White. All right, we got a timeout White. And the coach goes, I'm ready to play. I just wanted to save that possession. Okay, but there was a timeout granted. So while the team that called the timeout might be ready, as soon as the team that calls the timeout comes back on the field and notifies the officials, we are ready to play, we're done with our 100 seconds of that 120, there's still 20 seconds left to substitute. So even if they say, we don't want the timeout, we wanted the timeout, but we don't want any of the time, their opponent still has 20 seconds to substitute and be ready to play. So once a timeout is granted, even if the team that requested it says we don't want the time, the other team gets 20 seconds to substitute, up to 20 seconds to substitute, right? If they're not ready in 20 seconds, you've got a delay, but they get 20 seconds. So the coach, but we're ready. It's not a quick restart, right? We talked about restarts when we talked about play of the game. Coming out of a timeout is not a quick restart. It's a slow restart. We're going to set the field. We're going to make sure we got the right numbers of players on the field. We're going to make sure that all of our partners are ready to officiate and that they're in proper position. Well, part of that slow restart is they get 20 seconds to substitute, coach. You are the one who called the timeout. They get 20 seconds to substitute. Anything else there?
That was perfect.
Thank you, sir. 7 C's of a professional official. Number 1, competence, right? Know the rules. Spend a little bit of time each week putting your nose in the rule book. If you're questioned by a coach on a rule and you didn't have the answer at that moment, and but your partner did, go back and review it so that you're ready to answer that next time. Find the accepted ruling, the AR, that proves you were right or maybe proves you were wrong. And it's okay to be wrong every now and then, right? None of this is perfect. If you're right, great. If you're not, learn from it. Don't make that same mistake again, right? The mechanics manuals were made available to everybody once again in your USA Lacrosse My Account, My Transcript. When you're looking at your 2025 certification section, both the 2-man and 3-man mechanics manuals are available for download. Download them to your computer. Spend a little time reviewing those. If you feel like I don't need to read the rule book this week, well, dig into the mechanics manual a little bit. right? When you're doing your pregame, it's okay to ask your partner to quiz you. Hey, I've been studying this section of the rule book. Quiz me, give me a weird scenario, right? Test yourself regularly. Next up, communication, right? Talk more, talk often. Well, I think I got that part down. Talk with your crewmates before the game. Talk loudly on the field. You can't really over communicate with your crew, right? When flags are thrown, make sure we communicate what the fouls are so everybody knows, so that your partners, if you're the trail and you threw it, you don't just run off to go report it. Make sure your partners know what you're calling so they can properly set the field, so they can tell the goalkeeper whether he's down a guy for 30 seconds or a minute, right? Kids are picking inside, kids are interfering with the cutter. Talk them out of stuff, let them run, right? Talk to your face-off guys. You know the face-off guys are going to cheat. That's what they do. They are trying to get an advantage. Talk them out of stuff, right? You see a guy getting a little high with his checks, tell him to get his hands down. You think he's starting to swing a little wildly, tell him to be easy, right? Warn coaches, 2.5 minutes to go. Coach, if this score holds, you're going to have get it in, keep it in situation in 30 seconds, right? Talk to the timekeepers before the game. Talk to the person who's got the horn. Talk to the scorer. Use your hand signals all the time. Not just once in a while when you think the play is big. Always signal when you make a call. It lets everybody know what's going on, even if they can't hear you, right? Coaches always want to know which direction the ball's going in. Make sure you point, right? You may not be able to yell white because you might have laryngitis, but if your arm works, you can point.
Make sure you point. It kills me when I work with someone and the ball goes out of bounds, court side. I'm bench side and my partner doesn't point. You got to point. Everybody needs to know which way we're going to go. So point, please point. Hand goes up. We have dead ball. We got a whistle. Point. Just give me one way. We're going to white or blue. Doesn't matter. Point.
Right.
Please.
I may not be able to hear the white or blue, but I know which way you're pointing, right? I can see you point. You got a big play, big call, sell it, signal big, right? You're coming in, you're the single, and you got a ball in the net, but you've got a crease violation. Come in big, whistle, tweet, no, crease, right? Come in and sell it, be big. But if you have something that's particularly big, slow down, right? It's not a goal that you're taking off the board to make sure your partner's not signaling goal when you're going to take it down, right? Slow down. You got a guy laying on the ground. There's a big hit. You got flags down. You don't have to rush to report that foul. Let the trainer come deal with the player. Let the kid get some treatment. Make sure he's okay. Get him off the field. Then go report the foul. But take your time.
The other place not to rush to signal is a goal. If you have a mess at the goal, you're not sure if you got to push, you got to cross check, illegal body check, the guy's in the crease, did he leave his feet? And you have flags, you don't have to indicate goal. Take your time. That's another, and then communicate with your partner. Sometimes it's real quick. Your partner will nod yes, yes. And if you agree with them, then it's a goal that's nonverbal. And if you're not sure, get together, have a brief discussion. Keep the inmates in between you. Don't turn your back on them, and have a quick discussion. So it doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion. What did you see? I saw this. I saw his feet were in the crease before he shot. Okay, whatever it is, and then come out of it with a official, bench side official, explain what happened. So that's important communication.
We talked about it earlier in one of our earlier sessions. Signal goal from the crease. If you signal goal from the crease, you sprint into the crease, single side sprints into the crease, you get extra time to have that communication, right? If there's a crease violation, single should be running in, tweeting his whistle if he's got it, right? Lead, if you know you've got the crease violation, well, you've got the crease violation, right? You wouldn't be signaling goal anyway. But if you run into the crease before you signal and the ball for some reason isn't in the net and you made an inadvertent whistle, well, you don't have to take your hands down and say, oops, I know I said goal, but it's not a goal, right? Because you never signaled goal till you were in the crease and you realized, oh, the ball's not in the crease. I've got an inadvertent whistle, we're going this way. It's a lot easier than this, oops, no goal, right? It just looks better. Compassion. We don't think about this one very much when we are officiating, but we're all human. We all make a mistake. Have compassion for the players, for your fellow officials. Your partner is going to make a mistake too, right? Don't throw a fellow official under the bus by agreeing with a coach that a flag was bad. Just say nothing or support the call. Coach, he's right there. He had the best look at it. Make sure that you and your crew are a team. When coach complains to you that, hey, I think you're missing this, please look for this. Absolutely, coach. We'll watch for that. Thanks. I appreciate you making us aware of it, right? Again, coaches want to be heard a lot of the time. We need to be consistent, right? Your first flag or non-flag should set the level for the game for everybody, not just you. So watch what your partners are doing, what they're flagging, what they're passing on, right? If your partner is passing on something at his end of the field, then you really need to pass on it at your end of the field, make sure we are staying consistent, right? If he's letting some contact go, but you're being really ticky-tack at your end, it's a great way to get both coaches irritated, right? So let's be consistent. As a crew, we're going to set a level of play that we're going to tolerate today and that we're not going to tolerate, and we're going to stick with it. This is good. This is not good, right? Games get out of hand when we're calling different styles because one team's like, I'm getting away with, the one team feels like their opponent's getting away with something and they want to retaliate, right? I've been in games where I would normally throw several more flags than I do, but that's not the tone we set early, right? So I've also been in games where we set a tone where we had to flag every little contact. Those games take much too long when you're constantly adjudicating fouls. But we need to be consistent. Whatever that tone gets set early, needs to be the same flag in the first quarter that it is in the fourth quarter, right? Everybody wants consistency. Judgment they're going to get, but if we're consistent, they don't complain about judgment. They call the game the same way. It's not about being consistent between games, it's being consistent during this game, right? Whatever you and your partners have decided by your action or inaction, right? That's the level of play that we're going to go with today. And we need to be consistent across the board. You may find that, hey, it's the second half and things are getting out of hand. You have to tighten it back down, but you need to tighten it back down across the board, not at one end of the field. It's got to be all the way across the board. Confidence, right? Get it, keep it, and then think, okay, but be humble. Be confident in your calls. Don't back down, but don't get a chip on your shoulder. Think about it like being underwater, right? So zone out the crowd, remain completely calm under fire. Don't get mad. Don't laugh at anybody unless somebody tells you a really good joke. But be alert, be steady, and be professional. Now, we talked about confidence, but you also have to have conviction, right? So you must first have a strong belief that you're there to oversee the game in an accurate and a non-biased way, right? That belief in your ability to perform your duties is paramount. Believing in and confidently delivering all your foul calls and your instructions to coaches, instructions to players, how you communicate with your fellow officials, right? That provides the appearance that you're strong and you have an unwavering belief in your ability, not just confidence, but conviction. And the seventh C, courage, right? This is the choice and willingness to confront uncertainty, intimidation, and danger without showing fear, right? As an official from the parking lot to the field, you must show that you are the calm individual in the middle of the fray. So as we all find out, it's not easy to make the tough calls in tight spots, right? In this photo here, you can see this official is wiping out a goal and one team is like, got to do the right thing, right? Having the courage to do the right thing when everybody is watching and when everybody's not watching, it's difficult, but that's what we need to do in order to be a good official and be the best officials that we can be.
Oh,
All right. Post game. Just because the game's over doesn't mean our workday's over. So by rule, the crew chief's supposed to go to the table and confirm the score. Make sure they've got the score right in the book. Most of us have something we take out to the field with us. Go get it, sign the book, get out. Leave the field as a crew. Get to your changing room, or if you don't get a changing room, get out to your cars in the parking lot. Have a post game. Discuss big calls. If you had an ejection report that you have to write, now's another time to have a conversation about it. Let's go over it one more time. Crew chief, write it up, send it to the crew, let them provide their edits before you send it to your association president and your assigner, right? If you see something mechanically that one of your partners is doing a little non-standard, you might want to offer a correction or some, not necessarily a correction, but some guidance. Hey, this is how we do it. If they're coming from some other part of the country where they may do it differently. If one of your partners is giving you feedback about your game, they're not trying to beat you up. They're trying to make you better. If somebody gives you a critique about your officiating, one of your partners gives you a critique, remember that if they didn't care, they would say nothing. The only reason they're giving you feedback is because they want you to be better. If they didn't care about you, they would just let you be. So if somebody offers you feedback, take it with the understanding that they are trying to help you improve as an official. Cool. That's one of the hardest things to recognize. But understand that if anybody is giving you feedback, it's really because they care about your development as an official. And if they were trying to tear you down, they wouldn't tell you to your face. They'd go around and tell everybody else. So recognize it for what it is, an actual display of caring and respect. I am finished with slides, believe it or not, and it's still less than 2 hours. So as much as I like to talk, I managed to finish this up a little more quickly than we have scheduled. That said, I'm going to allow you guys to unmute yourselves, and if you have a question, now's the time. Any questions? Comments? Criticisms?
No, sir. Thank you very much.
Hey,
Doug?
David.
Sir?
Thank you.
All right. One thing to mention when you're doing the when you're addressing the table before the game, especially these days, remind those folks at the table to put their phones away during the game.
Good point. Especially if you got teenagers.
Yeah, especially.
What
I
if they're
don't,
using phone to clock?
Well, that'd be different, wouldn't it?
that should be a very special case.
Right. Now, does the association have a position officially when we're doing an equipment check as to whether the umpire and field judge be facing the benches or away from them?
When we're conducting stick checks, the field judge and umpire should be facing the benches. The R faces away from the benches. This way we have two sets of eyes on the players at all times. I have a request from our assigners that everyone should please update their blocks in Arbiter. Regardless of what association you're a member of, update all your blocks so that your assigners don't schedule you when you have other plans. I know Richie and Sal would appreciate that. So would Tom on the youth side of things. So make sure that you get your blocks in. If you're not willing to work a Saturday at a youth event, block your Saturdays, or you may end up with games that you have to turn back, and turning back games makes double work for our assigners. So please, let's try and avoid that. I'm going to stop recording at this time.